All right, cool. Well, I'm glad you guys are here. We're starting this new series called Expose. So this week and next week, we're going to be kind of talking about sex and dating and what God's plan is for that. Now, here's the deal right up front. This is not a sex education class. We're not going to talk about parts and things and how they work and all that. If you haven't done that yet, talk to mom and dad. They would love more than anything to talk to you about that. So yeah, have that conversation with them. But what we are going to do is, with this big sign on the wall, we're going to talk about how to have the best sex ever. So that's what today is going to be about, is what is God's plan for sex. So on the top of your outline, it is not a blank. This week is called Sex is Blank. So that's not a fill-in. Don't expect me to say anything. If you would like to fill it in, please do. You can write the best, awesome, something. You can write whatever you want. But I'm going to pray, and then we'll jump in. Dear Lord, just thank you for just the conversation we're having today. That SSM is a place where we can talk about whatever, and that today we are talking about your design for sex, that it's good, and what it's created for, and how we can have the best relationship with our spouse. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, I've got to notice something about our world in general, is that we're really, really good at making things more complicated than they actually need to be. If you know what I'm talking about. I had a friend send me a survey, kind of like she made the survey. She's like, hey, really quick, fill this out. It's to get more information about you. It's like, okay, cool. So I was like, great, I'll fill this thing out. I pulled it up on my phone. It was kind of while I was making dinner. And it starts off real easy, just like name, when's your birthday, like just kind of general information, what's your favorite chocolate? I was like, great. And I was making stuff, and Dina's like, what are you doing? Like, you're busy, and you're like making dinner, yet you're on your phone. I was like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm just filling this thing out really quick. And then all of a sudden there's like a sudden turn, and it starts asking me these like deep questions that I had to like think about, and asking me like, who's this people in your life? What is this? How can you help with this? What's and I was just like, it took me 35 minutes, and all of a sudden I was like, I thought this was going to be like a 2-second survey about who I am, and now I'm like going and going and going. But also, I don't know, how many of you guys have ever purchased something that's come with an instruction manual, and the instruction manual is like larger than the item? It has like 7 pages, like, oh, I bought a Harry Potter novel to turn on my vacuum. Like things like that. So our world tends to make things way, way, way more confusing than they actually are. And then on top of that, we live in a world also where like we don't really have firm rules, like, or it's not okay to have firm rules. It seems like nobody's kind of allowed to tell you like what's right or what's wrong. It's like, it's right for you, it's okay, it doesn't mean it's right for me, but my right and your right, and it's okay or whatever, we'll figure it out, which is kind of confusing. That maybe there's not really a good or a bad, it's kind of how you take it or perceive it, and then there's different viewpoints about every topic, so who knows what the real answers are, who knows what's actually right or wrong. Now, if you add sex into that craziness, now we have all this over-information and confusing things going on, all tied in with a belief or a thought of, well, what's right and what's wrong, and who can tell me, and why should you have an opinion that's more valuable than my opinion? And that's kind of the world that we live in, that, hey, don't judge me, this is what I think, that's okay if that's what you think, but it's not the same thing. Now, we played a game earlier today that kind of like filled in the blank, right? Well, that's kind of what we're going to do for today. We're going to say, okay, the world says sex is all this, and it's kind of confusing and everything, but what does God say sex is? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, even yesterday before service, I sat down and took a second and just literally looked up on Google. I was like, what is the definition of sex? Like, just trying to like really simply. And then Wikipedia, Merriam-Webster's, Oxford, like all these other dictionary encyclopedia companies popped up. And as I'm clicking through it, every one had like 10 different variations of the definition of sex. And then every website had their own variations. There's like hundreds of different explanations for the definition of sex. Our world tends to make things really, really confusing. So I want to give you guys what we're going to, for this moment, where we're going to say this is the definition of sex. And I apologize for the awkwardness. I'm just going to totally get it out of the way up front. So what is sex? The definition we're using is sex is using or touching a body part covered by a bathing suit for the purpose of climax. That's right. Now you got all the awkward out of the way. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we were saying when we were talking about sex today. That is what we are defining sex as. So there shouldn't be any questions about that. If you do, talk to your mommy. So I just want to get all the uncomfortable words out up front. But here's the deal. The reason that kind of feels funny is that our world makes sex kind of dirty or feel awkward or shameful, or there's all these kind of feelings associated or emotions associated with the word sex or the topic of sex or the conversation of sex. Now, God created Adam and Eve. If you ever read Genesis 1, right in the beginning, God creates Adam and Eve. You see between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. And God created them in this garden, this place where they were in perfection. They were created naked. They didn't have any clothes. There was nothing covering them. They were running around and doing what they do and having a great time. And then what happened is we find out that the serpent, which is Satan, comes into the garden and basically tempts them. It says, okay, well, what did God tell you guys to do? He said, name the animals, hang out things, be caretakers, take care of this. And he said, well, don't eat of the one tree that's in the center of the garden. And the serpent goes, well, why? Why did he tell you not to eat that one tree? What does God know that he doesn't want you to know? You see, God tells you don't eat that fruit because he knows you're going to find out. You're going to find out what's the difference between good and evil. You're going to know things that God knows that you don't. So they, kind of thinking about it, which we talked about this a few weeks ago, but they went and they took the fruit and they took a bite. And then what happened is they found out. They found out what good and evil was. They found out that they were naked. They found out that all of these things were happening in their lives. And what they did is they ran, they hid, they covered themselves up, and all of a sudden this nakedness becomes shameful. And now because of that, we live in a world where all the nakedness, or sex, where all those things have become dirty. They become shameful. They become something that is hidden from certain people and used not in the way that God had designed it for. So what we're going to talk about today is filling in those blanks. Sex is. What does the Bible say sex is? So the first thing, like I just said, God, in the beginning, God created Adam and Eve naked. He designed man and woman to work together, and it's because sex is God's idea. That's your first filling. Sex is God's idea. Nothing shocking there. Sex is God's idea. Now, suppose you wanted to learn about how an aircraft carrier works. You're like, there's this monster thing out in the ocean. It's got all these parts, and how does that thing work? Well, you wouldn't go to Taco Bell and ask the dude behind the counter, hey, real quick, could you just explain to me how does an aircraft carrier work? They would have no idea. That's not a topic that they're educated on. You'd want to go find the engineers, right? The guys who design that thing and work on it and know how many bolts and pieces and how many pounds of metal are involved and what type of hydraulic lifts are used. You want to go to the guys who know everything and all the parts and pieces about a boat like that. Now, the same thing if you wanted to know about Microsoft. If you're like, oh man, I want to know about Microsoft and software and computing and all that stuff, well, you'd go find Bill Gates, right? You'd sit that guy down and be like, tell me everything. How does this work? How'd you come up with it? Why does it work? I don't know. But you'd want to go to the guy who created it, who knows everything about it. Well, the same is true with sex. If you want to know about sex, you're going to go to the guy who came up with it. It was God's idea. So when we want to know about sex, we want to know in what context it's supposed to be used. You shouldn't be going to a celebrity. You shouldn't be going to a magazine. You shouldn't be going to all these different places. We should be looking and finding God and looking and asking him what it's all about. What is the truth about sex? Now, sex is God's idea, so nothing's surprising to him, right? He designed it. He invented it. He knows all about it. He wants you to have it. That's not something that, like I said, it wasn't designed to be shameful. God designed you to be a sexual human. He designed you to have feelings and emotions and chemicals and reactions and things that happen in your body intentionally. All of that was designed by God. Now, he designed it with a purpose, and he designed it with a plan, and he designed it to fit within a box. So, one of the things that we want you guys to know is that because God designed it, sex is good. Sex is good, and that's your filling. 1 Timothy 4:4 says, since everything God created is good, we should not reject any of it, but receive it with thanks. Receive it with thanks. See, and I love that verse. It makes total sense. God created it. He designed it. He intentionally put it into our lives and designed you for it. And because of that, it's good. And God wants you, like this sign on the wall, God wants you to have the best sex ever. He wants you to have the best sexual relation with your spouse that you possibly can. So do me a favor, turn to your neighbor and say, thank God for sex. Just kidding, don't do that.
Thank God for sex.
But some of you got to it down in the well, while it might kind of seem like a no-brainer, maybe it's obvious, or maybe it's not. It's important to remember that sex isn't bad, sex isn't dirty, sex it wasn't designed to cause regret or heartache or pain or any of that stuff in our lives. And our world makes it way more confusing than it has to be. It wasn't designed to be confusing. It wasn't designed to have an instruction manual that you can't figure out. Sex was designed to be very straightforward and very simple when it's used within the context of how He designed it for us. You see, because sex is used outside of the context that it was designed for, we have all sorts of issues in our world that we have to deal with today. We have to deal with sexual abuse. We have to deal with unwanted pregnancies. We have to deal with pornography addictions and abortion and violence and over-sexualized everything, our whole world. All things that we have to deal with because it was taken out of the context in which God had designed it for. So all that being said, you want to know what God's plan is? It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Sex is for a man and a woman who are married. Sex is for a man and a woman who are married. That's it. No big instruction manual, no ifs, ands, or buts, no other parts or pieces or contingencies. It says sex is for a man and a woman who are married. In Mark 10, 6-7, it says, but God made them male and female from the beginning of creation. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined with his wife. Hebrews 13:4 says, give honor to marriage and remain faithful to one another in marriage. God will surely judge people based on who are immoral and those who commit adultery. Can you imagine, like I said before, how much better off our world would be if everybody trusted it? Now, take a second and picture that. Everybody in the world that was ever born had only stayed within the confines of God's design for marriage. We wouldn't have AIDS. We wouldn't have sexually transmitted diseases. We wouldn't have all the crazy stuff, all the heartbreak. Like I said, we wouldn't have sexual abuse. We wouldn't have people cheating on each other. We wouldn't have all the broken marriages that we do from pornography and all the other areas that sex has broken down the relationships in our lives. All of those things would not exist. We wouldn't have teenagers feeling pressured to have sex with their boyfriend or girlfriend because they want them to stick around a little bit. We wouldn't deal with any of those things because it would be straightforward. Sex is for this and designed to be within this. But the problem is we think we know more than God, right? We're like, how could God know what I'm feeling or what I want or my needs or all that? How do we trust God and believe that what He is actually saying and the things that He has given us are the best way? How does God know what I needed? The world looks at the church and goes, you guys are outdated, you're ancient, you don't really know what's going on, you've never experienced this, the world's changing, culture's different now. The world says all of those things when they turn and look at us. And I understand, as a teenager, the struggle around sex is huge. And sometimes we have those feelings that everybody's doing it, or everybody's around me is taking part of it, or everybody's talking about it. I can tell you that's not true, but it definitely can feel that way. Why is everybody talking about it? Everybody's involved in it. But after all, if you are a Christ follower, we are supposed to trust in God. So you have to make a choice. Do I trust in God? Or do I think that my friend who does whatever, thinks that he knows what's best and can teach me all sorts of stuff? So like I mentioned in the beginning, you might have all sorts of questions about anything we're talking about tonight. Our volunteer team, any of us here would love to sit down and talk with you more about what that means or how it's played out in your life or things that you might want to know about. So there's something else that also we don't really pay much attention to, which is a really, really big one because sex is a big deal. Go ahead and write that down. Sex is a big deal.
Whiteboard time.
He's like, what? All right. Has to be it. All right, cool. Well, these are our two friends who, it's very important. Let's do the guy for this service. This is, last service, Chris was a good name. We're going to stick with Chris. Oh no, there's a Chris in the audience. That's weird. What about, how about Axel? This is Axel.
Totally not.
All right. So here's the deal. Axel,
Rose.
a young, good fella. Yeah, there you go. Axel R. Makes Steve happy. There you go. Oh, well, but Axel. Well, hold on. All right, we'll get to it. All right. So Axel Rose, this is him. So right now, Axel's in junior high, and he's thinking, I know it all. I just scored my first girlfriend. She's really awesome. Her name is Sarah. Yeah, why not? All right, her name is Sarah, and like any good junior high relationship, they held hands for the first time. It was an amazing moment, but like every good junior high relationship, it lasted 2 days, and they both got bored and went somewhere else. So, Axel, his heart was broken. He said, I need some time to recover from this. So next week, he started dating Melissa and him. Things click. They're firing. They're going on. They date for a month or two. They have their first kiss in the summer going into 8th grade. I don't know how to draw lips. There you go. Imagine those are lips. I'm not going to draw pictures. I did it. There you go. Dot. All right, Melissa and Axel have their first kiss. It's an amazing moment. Memorizing. They were waiting for a ride from mom, and they just snuck a kiss in somewhere. So that happened. It was great. But like every good junior high relationship, it broke up after a few weeks. And Axel, heartbroken, decides he's going to wait till high school when he's more mature before his next girlfriend. So day one of freshman year in high school, he meets Hillary. And Hillary and him are off to a good start. But he's already kissed Melissa, so that's not Melissa, right? Yeah. So not a big deal. So on their first date, him and Hillary, they kiss a little bit, maybe a little making out, but they date for a while. Maybe they date for 6 months. And by the time things progress, things start getting a little heavy, maybe a little heavy petting, things are happening. So him and Hillary, things are getting intense, maybe a little too intense for both of them, so they break up. When they go to winter formal for the first time because they're freshmen, and he realizes that Hillary's best friend is really into him. What's her name?
Betty.
Yep.
Suzanne.
Betty is on fire, and Axel goes, I think Betty is the one. So him and Betty, they break up. Hillary breaks up. He goes and scoots over to Betty, Hillary's best friend. And then, he's already been making out. Things are getting a little heavy. Him and Betty date for a little bit, and they get sexually active. And now him and Betty are having sex, and then it moves over. And he goes to college and has another relationship.
He got her pregnant.
3, and I don't know. So anyway, so Axel has got some relationships. Now this is, what do we say?
Rose.
Oh, okay, fine. This is Rose. She in junior high had a couple of relationships. She had a few experiences. She had a few things. And then in college, she meets Axel, and it's meant to be because her name is Rose, and now she's Rose. Anyways, so here's what I'm saying on this. Yeah, she's Rose. That's how it's meant to be. So here's the deal. The reason I'm it's a joke, but it's kind of serious. So in your life, there's a few things that you remember forever. But for instance, one of them wouldn't be, who of you remember the first time you brushed your teeth? Yeah, nobody remembers that. What are the first time that you had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Those aren't things that you remember. What?
I remember.
You're like a little kid. Oh, whatever. They don't have peanut butter in the Philippines? Oh, okay. Anyways, so those things aren't things you typically remember in your life, but you remember the first time you held hands with somebody, you remember your first kiss, You remember everything that happens, and there's a reason for that. See, God designed you that these things are permanent. The things like brushing your teeth and eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, not permanent. But these things are permanent. There's a part of your brain that locks that away forever. So that means by the time Axel and Rose get together, they have all of this as part of them. And it's a memory that is ingrained in each one of them. They each have different memories with different people that they're bringing into this relationship together. And here's why that's a big deal. You are designed for that to stick with you forever. We're not designed to have multiple relationships with all different people and then come together in the end and share those with one another. We're not designed for that. God designed you to have all of these experiences with one person. He designed that so that your first kiss, your first makeout session, your first heavy petting session, your first sexual experience with your whatever, all of that, you were designed to have all that with one person, which is your spouse. You're designed to have that with your wife. Now, if you've done those things before, or pieces, or little, or whatever, I'm not saying you can't have a great relationship with your spouse. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to work through those things. And they're not easy. You have to, on Wednesday night, we had a premarital counseling couple up here. And premarital counseling, that's one of the big things that people have to work through, is their past, their history. And, sexual experiences are part of that, but I would say intimate experiences are a part of that. Maybe they're not even all sexual, but the intimate experiences you have with different people in your life, you come into your relationship, you stand at an altar with your spouse, you say, we're going to do this forever. You have to open up and share about every single one of those. Because later down the line, when your spouse finds out about more of them, or more things, maybe it's not even a person, maybe it's pornography, your spouse finds out about that, those are all things that you have to work through. It's not like I told you, ooh, it's off my chest, we're all good now. There are things that you have to process and talk about and fight through and work through. If you want to have the best relationship ever, if you want to have the best sex ever, that is how you have to do it. So, God designed you to not have multiple partners. God designed you to be with one person and to share all those experiences with them. So, God sees sex as a big deal. And there's a reason it's mentioned over and over and over in the Bible. It's not because the sin of sex is necessarily greater or less than others. It's because there's something special about it, about your body, about how sex was designed by God. So it's something that's mentioned a lot in the Bible. Now, this might seem like an odd comparison, but say you have a couple of friends and they, for some reason, get really into like stealing and breaking into houses. Right? It's totally a weird thing. But say they're just like, yeah, we're going to go break into a couple houses, and they come back and they're like, dude, you got to be a part of this. It's so great. And you're going, no, that's illegal. I know that's not right. I don't want to be a part of that. And then they go and they tell some other people, like, hey, we're breaking into houses. It's really sweet. We're stealing stuff. You got to be a part of it. And then they start telling you, like, well, you're not going to be cool unless you're breaking into houses and, like, hanging out with us and being a part of it. Or more people start doing it. And all of a sudden there's movies about everybody stealing and breaking into things, and there's commercials about breaking into stuff, and it becomes a social norm, and now people are looking at you going, well, you're so old school, like, I can't believe you're not stealing stuff. Everybody steals stuff. Like, what do you mean you don't steal stuff? Well, it's kind of a weird comparison, but that's exactly where our culture has gone. We've gone from a world that knew that sex was designed a certain way, and it was supposed to stay within that, to a world where now, if you're not part of it, if you're not doing it, everybody else is doing it. The world says you can do it whenever, however, wherever, with whoever. It makes no difference because it's just a physical one-time action. And the Bible is over here going, God designed you with a purpose, with a plan, and that plan is not for whoever and whenever. If that was God's plan, then we wouldn't be talking about it. It wouldn't be in the Bible how to lay it out. If God's plan was, sex is great, do it with whoever, then it wouldn't be in the Bible laid out the way that it is. But that's not God's plan. God's plan is for you to wait with your spouse. So, if sex is God's idea, if sex is good, if it's for a man and a woman who are married, sex is a big deal, then sex is worth the wait. That's your last one. Sex is worth the wait. The toughest part that most people, teenagers, is that kind of last phrase of the last point is, until marriage, or waiting until you are married. A man and a woman who are married part. That gets tough. And again, if you do the math, you're like, I'm 15 right now. If I get married when I'm like 25 or 26, I've got like 10, 11 more years to wait until I can have sex. And some of you are like, I'd rather freaking poke my eyeballs out. And I don't know where you're at in that. And maybe you're thinking that, like, I'd rather light my phone on fire and never have one if I could just have sex now. But here's the deal. Sex is worth the wait. And we're going to spend some time talking about that next week. That's all we're going to talk about, actually. But I want to give you kind of 3 points to encourage you a little bit. The first one is that God has a reason for everything. He designed sex to be a certain way. Everything he does is intentional. And his number one motive is always love. We talked about a few series ago that God designed us. God died for us. He sent his son Jesus to die for us. He built this place for us. He made heaven for us. And he doesn't need us for any of it. The reason he did it all is because he loves you. So when he says, this is the best way to have the best sex with your spouse, it's not because he's trying to torture you. It's because he's going, this is what's best for you. If you want to have the best, this is how you do it. The second one is, yes, sex is a huge part of our culture. And yes, God created you to be a sexual being. He created you so that when you start revving things up, your body goes yes, and endorphins and chemicals start flying, and it feels good. All of that for a reason. Sex is not supposed to be shameful, but sometimes people, when they start feeling those feelings, they know that I'm not supposed to have sex, and they feel shame, and they feel like that's not the way it's supposed to be. But God designed you to feel that way. But we are supposed to choose and make a choice and be disciplined on and holding back on some of those things and choosing not to set yourself up to be in those situations that are getting you going. Now, the question people ask is how far is too far? We would say for high school students, holding hands and making out is even starting to push the limits, because making out, right, once it starts getting heated, is sending those chemicals. It's getting your body ready for sex. That is the beginning of it. So, set yourself up to win. Think about where you are, what you're doing. Don't be laying down in a bedroom somewhere with somebody that you're not supposed to be with. Like, those are the things that you need to set up and think through on your own. All right. And it's important to remember that it's natural, and just because you think everybody is doing it, it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't mean that should just be what you're doing. So we're not animals. We're not you feel an urge, so do whatever. You're better than that. You are a human being. God created you with a mind and a body and a brain to be able to hold off and say, now is not the right time. To say, I can wait. Just because it feels natural, and the world tells you it's natural to just have sex with whoever, God created you to be smarter than that and to know more than that. So it is natural to have those feelings and those emotions. All right. So, like I said, there's so many areas of our lives that sex comes into. But if you take sex out of it, the question that you kind of want to ask is, do I want to follow God's will or not? And that's, even if you take sex out of the equation, and that question comes up in so many different areas. Because sometimes we go, man, well, I love what God has to say about that. I totally want to do that, and I'm okay with that. But this piece, I'm not totally okay with. And there's been definitely times in my life where I was the same way. Where I was like, yes, I think God is great, He does all these things, blah, 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 but this one, I think I know better, or I want to keep this one, or maybe I'm just not going to do that, which isn't what we're supposed to do. If you call yourself a Christian and a Christ follower, and we want to follow God's will, if we're supposed to be a light to the world, if we're supposed to be like Christ and work towards being the image of Christ, well, then we need to choose. Do we follow God's will or not? Because sin and sin. Sexual sin isn't more or worse or better or whatever than other sins. Like it said before, God definitely speaks about sexual sin a ton. But we have to make the choice. Do we follow God's will or do we not? So the last point was, it's worth the wait. And that's what we're going to talk about next week, is waiting for sex. Is it worth it? How is it worth it? And we're going to talk a little bit about some tips and how to wait well. So your thought for the week is, God's plan is always perfect. God's plans are always perfect. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for our time together. My prayer is that as we're going through and talking about and dealing with just our sexually charged culture and the relationships in our lives, Lord, I pray that you are guiding us. That you are keeping us down the path that you designed us for, that when we are faced with things that we are uncomfortable with or know we're not supposed to be, that you would help guide us away from that. I pray that we would understand that your word is there because you love us. Not because you are trying to hold us back or you are trying to stop us from anything, but because you know what's best for us. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.